Top story begins with the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where another night of intense military activity has been reported across several regions. According to the Russian broadcast, Russian forces launched a new wave of long-range missile and drone strikes against targets described as military infrastructure. The report says the attacks focused on logistics centers, fuel storage facilities, and port-related infrastructure that Russian officials claim is being used to support Ukraine's military operations. These statements have not been independently verified. One of the main locations mentioned was the port city of Odessa. The broadcast claimed that fuel storage tanks were hit, triggering large fires visible from several kilometers away. It also reported that emergency crews were deployed as smoke rose over the affected area. Russian officials further stated that a cargo ship transporting military supplies near the Black Sea was struck during the operation. At the time reflected in the source, Ukrainian authorities had not confirmed these claims and independent verification remained unavailable. The broadcast also described explosions in several other regions including Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and Sumy. Residents reportedly heard repeated blasts throughout the night while air raid alerts remained active. Military analysts continue to observe that long-range drones and precision-guided missiles are playing an increasingly important role in the conflict. Both Russia and Ukraine have expanded their use of unmanned systems over the past year, making drone warfare one of the defining features of modern combat. The report suggests that these operations are intended to reduce the opponent's ability to transport supplies, fuel, and military equipment to the front lines. Logistics hubs have become strategic targets because disrupting transportation networks can significantly affect military operations. As fighting continues, civilians in many regions remain under constant pressure from air raid warnings and the possibility of additional attacks. Emergency services continue responding wherever security conditions permit. The latest developments demonstrate that the conflict remains highly active, with military operations continuing across multiple regions while diplomatic efforts struggle to gain momentum. In our next segment, we'll examine the latest reports from the battlefield and the broader military situation in eastern Ukraine. We now turn our attention to the situation on the battlefield, where fighting continues across several key areas of eastern Ukraine. According to the Russian broadcast, military operations remain concentrated around strategic positions in the Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. Russian officials reported that their forces continued offensive operations and claimed additional territorial advances in several locations. Those claims had not been confirmed by Ukrainian authorities at the time, reflected in the source. Military analysts say the fighting has become increasingly focused on transportation routes rather than simply capturing territory. Roads, railway connections, bridges, and supply corridors have become critical objectives because they determine how quickly troops, ammunition, fuel, and equipment can reach frontline units. The broadcast also emphasized the growing importance of unmanned aerial systems. Small first-person view drones, commonly known as FPV drones, continue to play a major role in reconnaissance and precision strikes. These relatively inexpensive systems can locate military vehicles, observe troop movements, and carry explosive payloads against tactical targets. At the same time, larger, long-range drones continue to be used for attacks against military infrastructure located far behind the front lines. Both sides have increasingly relied on these systems to disrupt logistics while reducing risks to pilots. The report further described the extensive use of guided aerial bombs and long-range artillery. Military experts note that these weapons allow forces to strike command centers, ammunition depots, and transportation hubs without engaging in close combat. Another challenge mentioned in the broadcast is electronic warfare. Modern military units frequently attempt to interfere with drone communications, navigation systems, and battlefield communications. As a result, both sides are continuously adapting their technology and tactics in response to new electronic countermeasures. The report also described the difficult conditions faced by soldiers operating near the front. Constant surveillance by reconnaissance drones means that troop movements are often detected within minutes. Military vehicles frequently change routes, while smaller units rely on camouflage and dispersed positions to reduce the risk of being targeted. According to the broadcast, both Russian and Ukrainian forces continue reinforcing defensive positions while conducting offensive operations in selected sectors. This combination of heavy drone activity, artillery exchanges, and localized ground assaults has contributed to a battlefield environment that changes rapidly from day to day. Military observers continue to caution that many claims made by either side during active combat are difficult to verify independently until additional evidence becomes available. Information released during wartime often reflects the perspective of the reporting side and may later be updated as new facts emerge. As the conflict continues, analysts believe that control of logistics, technology, and sustained military resources may prove just as important as territorial gains. Coming up next, we'll examine the international political response, including ongoing discussions in Washington and European capitals regarding military assistance, diplomatic efforts, and future security cooperation. As military operations continue on the battlefield, international attention remains focused on diplomatic efforts and future security assistance for Ukraine. According to the broadcast, discussions in Washington continue regarding future military aid packages. One of the major topics is the continued supply of advanced air defense systems designed to intercept incoming missiles and drones. The report says Ukrainian officials continue urging Western allies to increase deliveries of interceptor missiles, arguing that stronger air defenses are essential for protecting cities, energy infrastructure, and military facilities from ongoing attacks. The broadcast also discusses comments attributed to former US President Donald Trump. According to the report, Trump expressed caution regarding expanded production arrangements involving Patriot interceptor missiles, saying that such decisions require careful consideration. The broadcast also states that he emphasized the importance of pursuing diplomatic solutions alongside military assistance. These remarks are presented as reported in the source. Meanwhile, European governments continue reviewing additional military assistance packages. Officials across several NATO member states are discussing future deliveries of ammunition, armored equipment, air defense systems, and financial support aimed at strengthening Ukraine's defensive capabilities. The report notes that these discussions come as governments attempt to balance immediate military needs with long-term security planning. Defense officials are also evaluating industrial production capacity, ammunition stockpiles, and the ability to sustain support over an extended period. Another issue receiving attention is the coordination between NATO allies. Although member states continue expressing support for Ukraine, individual governments remain responsible for deciding the scale and timing of their military assistance. As a result, negotiations often involve both political considerations and practical questions about available equipment. The broadcast also highlights continuing discussions about sanctions targeting Russia. Lawmakers in the United States and Europe remain divided over how additional economic measures could affect international trade, global energy markets, and domestic industries. Supporters of stronger sanctions argue that increasing economic pressure could reduce Russia's ability to finance military operations. Others caution that broader restrictions may also create economic challenges for countries implementing those measures, particularly in areas such as energy prices, manufacturing, and international supply chains. The report further notes that diplomatic channels remain active despite ongoing military operations. International officials continue emphasizing that negotiations remain an important part of any long-term effort to reduce tensions and eventually reach a political settlement. Security experts continue warning that while military developments often dominate headlines, diplomatic decisions made in Washington, Brussels, and other capitals could have significant long-term consequences for the direction of the conflict. For now, governments continue balancing military support, economic policy, and diplomatic engagement while closely monitoring developments on the ground. Coming up next, we'll examine the investigation into the security incident in Poland, NATO's response, and how European governments are reassessing regional defense and preparedness measures. Another major development covered in the broadcast involves an ongoing investigation in Poland after an unidentified aerial object crashed inside Polish territory. According to the report, Polish authorities immediately secured the area and launched an official investigation to determine exactly what had entered the country's airspace. Emergency personnel, security forces, and military specialists were deployed to examine the scene and collect evidence. The broadcast states that some Polish officials suggested the object may have been a Russian cruise missile. However, the investigation had not reached a final conclusion at the time reflected in the source, and officials acknowledged that determining the object's origin would require a detailed technical analysis. The incident has attracted significant international attention because Poland is a member of NATO. Any security event involving the alliance's territory is closely monitored by allied governments and military commanders. According to the report, NATO officials were informed shortly after the incident and continued coordinating with Polish authorities while awaiting the results of the investigation. Alliance members emphasized the importance of establishing the facts before drawing final conclusions. The broadcast also describes how Polish authorities reviewed emergency preparedness procedures following the incident. Officials encouraged citizens to remain informed through official government channels and reminded residents about national emergency guidance. Beyond the investigation itself, the report says the incident has renewed discussions about European air defense capabilities. Governments across the region continue investing in radar systems, missile defense technology, and early warning networks designed to detect potential threats more quickly. Military analysts note that modern air defense systems face increasingly complex challenges. Cruise missiles, drones, and other aerial threats often fly at low altitudes or follow unpredictable routes, making rapid detection and interception more difficult than in previous decades. The report also highlights the growing importance of intelligence sharing among NATO members. Satellite imagery, radar information, and surveillance aircraft all contribute to building a more complete picture of regional security developments. European defense planners continue reviewing lessons learned from recent incidents, with increased attention being given to protecting critical infrastructure, transportation networks, and civilian populations during periods of heightened military activity. According to the broadcast, the investigation in Poland also became the subject of political debate, with officials discussing broader questions about regional security, defense readiness, and future investments in military capabilities. Security experts continue emphasizing that maintaining effective communication between allied governments remains essential during periods of increased military tension. Rapid information sharing can help reduce uncertainty and support informed decision-making as events unfold. While the investigation continues, officials have urged the public to avoid speculation until technical experts complete their examination and release official findings. Coming up next, we'll look at the broader humanitarian situation, including the impact of continued military operations on civilians, emergency services, and international relief efforts across the region. While military developments continue to dominate international headlines, the humanitarian impact of the conflict remains one of the most significant concerns. According to the broadcast, repeated missile and drone attacks have continued to affect communities across several regions. Air raid sirens, emergency evacuations, and temporary power disruptions have become a routine part of daily life for many civilians living near active combat zones. The report describes emergency response teams working around the clock following overnight attacks. Firefighters, medical personnel, and rescue workers have been deployed to areas affected by explosions, while local authorities continue assessing damage to infrastructure. Civilian transportation has also been affected in some regions. Damage to roads, railway lines, and utility networks can delay emergency services and complicate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. According to the broadcast, local governments continue encouraging residents to follow official safety instructions during periods of heightened military activity. Emergency shelters remain available in many urban areas, and authorities regularly issue warnings through mobile alerts and public information systems. The report also highlights the growing strain placed on healthcare services. Hospitals and emergency medical facilities continue treating patients injured during attacks while also maintaining routine medical care for local populations. International humanitarian organizations remain active throughout the region wherever security conditions permit. Their work includes delivering food, medical supplies, emergency shelter materials, and other essential assistance to displaced families and vulnerable communities. The broadcast notes that rebuilding damaged infrastructure remains a major challenge. Power stations, transportation facilities, and public utilities require continuous repair efforts as military operations continue. Beyond physical damage, humanitarian organizations have repeatedly emphasized the psychological impact of prolonged conflict. Families living under repeated air raid warnings often experience significant emotional stress, particularly children and elderly residents. Education has also been disrupted in some areas. Schools continue adapting through a combination of remote learning, temporary facilities, and modified schedules depending on local security conditions. According to the report, many civilians have adjusted their daily routines around security alerts, often planning travel, work, and other activities based on the possibility of sudden warnings. Despite these challenges, emergency personnel, volunteers, and humanitarian workers continue supporting affected communities. Their efforts include distributing aid, restoring essential services, and assisting families displaced by the fighting. The broadcast concludes this segment by noting that the humanitarian consequences of the conflict remain an important part of the overall situation, extending well beyond military developments alone. Coming up next, we'll examine broader international developments, including migration issues in Europe, political debates over security policy, and how governments are responding to evolving regional challenges. In addition to developments related to the conflict in Ukraine, the broadcast also turns its attention to broader security issues affecting Europe. One of the major topics is the growing migration pressure at Europe's external borders. According to the broadcast, Spanish authorities continue responding to increased numbers of migrants arriving near the North African enclave of Ceuta. The report describes local officials working with national security agencies to manage the situation while monitoring new arrivals. The broadcast says local authorities have expressed concern about the increasing pressure on public services, emergency response teams, and border security personnel. Officials continue evaluating additional measures to strengthen border management while maintaining humanitarian assistance for those in need. European governments remain divided over how best to address migration. Some leaders support stronger border controls and expanded security measures, while others continue emphasizing humanitarian responsibilities and international cooperation. The report also notes that immigration policy has become an increasingly important political issue across several European countries. Governments are balancing national security concerns with existing international commitments related to refugees and asylum procedures. Beyond migration, European officials continue discussing the region's overall security environment. According to the broadcast, several countries are increasing investments in defense systems, surveillance technology, and military readiness. Governments have announced plans to modernize air defense capabilities, improve intelligence sharing, and strengthen cooperation between allied nations. Military planners are also paying closer attention to protecting critical infrastructure. Energy facilities, communication networks, transportation systems, and ports have become key priorities as governments evaluate potential security risks. The report further explains that many European countries are reviewing emergency preparedness plans. These include improving civil defense procedures, expanding public warning systems, and conducting training exercises designed to improve coordination between military and civilian authorities during emergencies. Security experts interviewed in the broadcast argue that modern threats extend beyond traditional military operations. Cybersecurity, disinformation campaigns, attacks on infrastructure, and hybrid forms of conflict have become important considerations for policymakers throughout Europe. At the same time, governments continue emphasizing cooperation through international organizations and regional partnerships. Intelligence sharing, joint military exercises, and coordinated diplomatic efforts remain central to Europe's long-term security strategy. The broadcast concludes that while immediate military developments continue to attract global attention, European leaders are increasingly focused on preparing for a wide range of future security challenges that extend beyond the current conflict. As governments continue responding to changing geopolitical conditions, both domestic policy decisions and international cooperation are expected to play an increasingly important role in shaping Europe's security landscape. Coming up next, we'll examine the latest economic developments, ongoing discussions about international sanctions, and how global markets continue responding to the evolving geopolitical situation. As military and diplomatic developments continue, governments are closely monitoring the economic impact of the conflict. According to the broadcast, discussions over additional sanctions against Russia remain active in both the United States and Europe. Supporters argue that stronger sanctions could increase economic pressure, while critics warn they may also affect global trade, energy supplies, and financial markets. Energy security remains a major concern. European governments continue monitoring fuel prices, electricity costs, and supply chain stability as businesses adapt to changing economic conditions. The report also notes that geopolitical tensions continue influencing international trade, transportation, and investment. Financial analysts are watching currency markets and commodity prices closely as governments announce new economic and security policies. Another key issue is defense spending. Several European countries are increasing investment in military modernization, including air defense systems, cybersecurity, and critical infrastructure. Officials say these efforts are aimed at improving long-term security and preparedness. Economists interviewed in the broadcast emphasize that future economic stability will depend on both government policies and diplomatic progress. As the situation continues to evolve, decisions made in the coming months could have lasting effects on global trade, energy markets, and international investment. Coming up next, we'll conclude today's program with the latest international outlook and the key developments to watch in the weeks ahead. Welcome back for our final segment. Today's developments show that the conflict in Ukraine continues to shape military operations, international diplomacy, and regional security. Governments remain focused on military support, economic policies, and diplomatic efforts while closely monitoring events on the ground. Analysts emphasize that modern conflicts extend beyond the battlefield, involving cybersecurity, intelligence, and critical infrastructure. At the same time, humanitarian organizations continue assisting civilians affected by the ongoing conflict. As the situation evolves, officials encourage the public to rely on verified information as reports may change while investigations continue. That concludes today's international news update. Thank you for watching. If you found this report informative, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more global news and analysis.